How you guys doing? Las Vegas, who's here for the first time? Wow, who's been here a few more times before? Yeah, see the veterans. So welcome to the United States of America, welcome to Las Vegas. It's a pleasure to be here and share with you today about, I guess, my journey with US property, why I decided a couple of years ago to take action. A lot of people talk about doing things, a lot of people hear about opportunities. In life, we know there's very few people as a percentage that actually follow through and do something. And to give you the clue to success in any endeavor, it's the people that follow through and take action, the people that generally produce the results. So I acknowledge and commend each and every one of you for being here. It not only proves that you've thought about the idea, you've followed through, you've taken action, you backed it up, and many of you already in this room are successful international investors in the US property market, and I dare say most of you are looking to expand that or, even further. Who's looking to have a lot of success in the US property market? Okay. And that's what I talk about, not only how to get started, but how can you go through and really, I guess, ramp this up as an opportunity that can really serve you and your families and achieve some of the financial goals that you have. And I'll also share with you why I'm very bullish on the US. I'll go through some of the misconceptions that people have about the US economy, about US property, what can prevent them from taking action. Once you can understand the high degree of success that can be had, you'll be a lot more certain. And when you have certainty, you follow through and do things. I'll give you a bit of a global economic update as well as what I see is happening in the world right now and how we can, I guess, preempt, predict the future to some level of certainty so we can take advantage of those opportunities. I know I'm speaking to the converted. You're obviously excited about this opportunity, but also want to welcome in people that will be watching this from the comfort of their lounge room at home, and maybe it's for the first time they're still learning about the US property market and don't have the level of knowledge that you guys already have. So we'll cover for the basics as well. First of all, I guess I share my journey on US property. It started, I'm thinking around a bit over 2 years ago. Like many people, I'd heard about it. I was busy with other financial strategies and other things I was doing in my life, and I just didn't get around to doing anything about it. Who can relate to that? So, but I kept on hearing about it, and some of my friends were having success with it, and I guess when you hear about something enough, you eventually decide to do it. So I thought, okay, what have I had to do in the past to achieve success? Whether it's been in business, whether it's been in the stock market, whether it's been in, say, Australian real estate market, whether it's been in any endeavor in life. And I went back to, okay, what do you need to do? First of all, you need to find a model. Is that true? The shortcut to success, jot this down. We all should know it to be true. If there is a shortcut to success, what is it? And I believe there is, and the shortcut to success is, at school we're taught not to copy, remember? At school, you're taught not to copy. I'm going to suggest in the 21st century, if you want to excel and outperform other people, then you should copy. But the word we use instead of copying is modeling. We're going to model success. So what we want to do is look at a successful model of how we could go and achieve that. So for I'm thinking about maybe 16, 17, 18 years ago, I'd never invested in Australian real estate. So I found a mentor, a millionaire mentor, and he taught me about real estate. So I found a role model. I didn't know what I was doing, so I learnt. That was a shortcut to success. He was probably 55 years of age at the time. He had decades of experience investing in the real estate and commercial and Australian residential property. I had no experience, so I was able to borrow his decades of experience, compress that knowledge down, so in the few short months, I could learn what had taken him decades to learn. Make sense? So it's really had nothing to do with age. I remember when I was 21 years of age and starting out my first business, back then is that there was this preconception that if you're young, you couldn't be successful. But today, younger people don't have that misconception. Is that true? Actually, younger people now have the advantage in today's world, in the internet world, in the tech world, that if you're young, it's a major advantage. Is it true? Sorry to disappoint some of you, but because they've grown up in an environment of the internet and computers where they have that natural knowledge that even in my generation, certainly baby boomer generation, or in my grandparents' generation, just simply would have to learn so much to even get up to speed with that. So my point is that when we model success, that's the only way to accelerate what we're going to do. Now, we're going to look at, okay, if we want to invest in another market, we've all heard the things that can go wrong. We're going to look at some of the mistakes that I made so you can avoid some of those. And we're going to look at how do you get the best results in the shortest period of time as possible. Before we go into that, I'll also share with you why we have this opportunity. Because I think you really have to have the right perspective and realize we have a short period of a window of opportunity to take advantage of an anomaly in the market that has never happened before and is unlikely to happen again in your lifetime. So it's a matter of being, you've heard it before, prepared for opportunity, execute it while you can, get the result, and then you'll look at what else you will do after you achieve that result. Does that make sense? Can you just show of hands, who's actually excited about the US property opportunity? And so you should be. I mean, the opportunity is phenomenal, and we really have to, I guess, be grateful and realize how fortunate we are, especially as Australians. Who's from Australia here? Any Kiwis in the room? Okay, Kiwis. Welcome to the Kiwis as well. And they're almost as fortunate as us, Australians. And I say that sincerely because we have total respect for Kiwis, but the reason I say that is because of our dollar, okay? They still have a high dollar, but not as high as Australian dollar. So we're going to look at that, at why you would also be investing in the US market from that reason as well, okay? I guess what people have to look at is that when I started 2 years ago, so I followed through, decided to learn, I come to the United States, I did the groundwork as well. Of course, I was able to have a team of people assist and work with, but I still got out in the streets, I got out in the suburbs of the United States, around the cities, I drove around, I looked at countless houses, so I got a real feel for it. And I guess what I'm excited about you guys, if you haven't had that chance yet, and many of you are going on the US tour for 3 or 4 days after this, once you get and actually into the suburbs, you get through the houses, you get a feel for it, becomes real then. And you gain that extra insight and knowledge. You also become pretty amazed because you hear about the stories of houses that once were $250,000, $300,000 that you can acquire for $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 is almost unbelievable. And you perhaps don't fully believe it until you see it with your own eyes. Does it make sense to everyone? So because in Australia, you can hear a lot of people think, why aren't they taking action with US property? One, let's think about why people don't do it. One, I would say, jot it down, they're probably too busy. They're like most people, in life, they're just not trained. They do not have the psychology to train themselves. If there's an opportunity, you just have to do what Nike says, and that is what? Just do it. You actually have to find something and actually just do it. Most of us, it's all like we get busy, we're doing other things, so we hear about it, and we don't often follow through. So many people are busy. The second thing that would stop most people taking advantage of this opportunity is they simply don't know how. They're in Australia, they're in New Zealand or some part of the world, and they're like, well, how do I do it? Do I have to fly to the United States? Do I have to become a full-time investor? How much money is it going to cost to learn how to do this? What cities should I buy in? What sort of houses should I go for? Should I go for condos? Should I go for houses? What suburbs? What areas? They don't know any of that. So I guess you could say a lack of education will certainly hinder a lot of people doing it successfully. Anyone can do it, but whether they can do it successfully is different stories, because you will hear there is horror stories of people investing in the US property market. There's stories, even tragic stories. I think I've shared with you of the Australian that bought property in Detroit and went to collect the rent and was shot dead. And that made a lot of the news in Australia. So there's places that you don't want to be buying property in the US. I want to also talk about today, jot this down, cheap houses versus value. There's a big difference. You can buy cheap US houses. They're cheap for a reason. We're not looking to buy cheap houses. We're looking to buy houses with intrinsic value. Jot that down. I'm going to talk about that today. Intrinsic value. The same thing we do if we're buying companies. Same thing we do if we're buying stocks in the stock market. We're looking for intrinsic value. So these are just some of the reasons people don't take advantage of the US property market. Other people are skeptical. Sounds too good to be true. Therefore, they think it probably is. They don't understand why it's sounds too good to be true. They don't understand the anomaly in the market, the opportunity that presents itself. And yes, for most people, it will be too good to be true. I've got interviewed on radio a lot about different strategies. In particular, interviewers ask about US property. They say, Jamie, is it a strategy that the average Australian should be doing? And I say, in fact, I would probably say no. The average Australian probably shouldn't do it. Because unless they're willing to get educated, unless they're willing to develop an investment psychology, or unless they've got access to a service that's going to do it for them, the average Australian jumping on the internet or just flying to America without training, without support, is a high probability they will stuff it up. Does it make sense? Real estate agents in America will hear your Australian accent or your Kiwi accent. They'll think it's the same thing. If you're Kiwi Australian, they won't be able to determine the difference. And they'll go, as much as they love our accent over here, have you noticed that? Okay, guys, you been out clubbing yet? Girls, you've been out clubbing yet? They love our accent, but they also know you live on the other side of the world. And it's like, come in, spinner. We're going to sell you a property. They know you're not going to be there to check on it, and there's things that can go wrong. So you don't want to be taking advantage of the US market. You got to look at, there's always things that can go wrong. And I'll highlight some of the things that have gone wrong in the past that we had to learn the hard way. But you can avoid all that because you don't have to go through that. And certainly, and I'll highlight why I think, and why I've been talking for some time, why I'm so bullish on the US property market, which I think it's very critical. I think what you've got to look at is, and I've covered this for some of you who's been to one of my live seminars before? Okay? And who's never seen me before, except on DVD? Okay, wow. So aren't you lucky? Aren't you glad you come to Las Vegas? So jot this down. This is what you understand. Like, if we have zero financial, call this FE, financial education. If we have zero financial education, then if we want to retire or have income coming in that replaces our income so we don't have to work, most people think they have to win lotto, win, say, $2 million in lotto. If we do that, if people win lotto, where do they invest their money? If they do, they put it where? In the bank, and they'll get 5% in Australia. Can you still get 5%? It's dropping down. You struggle now to get 5%. If you got 5% on $2 million is how much? How much? Some of you aren't ready to think yet. How are you going to win a blackjack if you can't quickly calculate? So 5% say, so most people think to retire they've got to win lotto, okay? What we've got to understand is that how we lower this amount we need, and this is the value of financial education. Even I know you're getting access to 20th US property as far as a service, and they'll pretty much do everything for you, and you don't have to be educated. As an education organisation, we're still very big on you being educated so you know what you're doing, because then you're going to have accountability and ownership over your decisions, which is the only way to be successful. Otherwise, you're reliant on other people. Making sense? So by increasing our level of financial education, we actually decrease the amount of capital we need to achieve our financial targets. As an example, if you wanted $100,000 a year passive income, cash flow coming in, $8,000 a month as an example, passive cash flow coming in to add to your lifestyle, then generally you need to win $2 million in lotto unless you got financially educated. By becoming financially educated and learning about superior investment strategies, you can lower that. Let me give you an example. In US property, if you are able to build a portfolio of, say, $500,000, which would be 10 houses at $50,000 or whatever combination, and you're able to get 20% cash flow return, okay, just to keep the numbers simple. That would give you how much cash flow? 100,000. So the value of financial education is not only in what you will save in time, because to get to 500,000 instead of 2 million like most people need is a lot shorter period of time. It also means shorter amount of capital required. So the value of financial education is a lot. If you get highly financially educated and become a sophisticated investor, at the highest level is where you actually need no money and you can get very high returns, okay, or very little money. In other words, we're using other people's money, whether to buy companies or to buy real estate, no money down type strategies, etc., or little money. Like you give an example of Sir Richard Branson, Virgin Blue, Australian Airlines, Virgin Blue. He started that with a $10 million check. We say, well, that's not no money down. For him, that's a small amount of money as an investment. And he made over $1 billion within less than 5 years from that investment. Who'd be happy with a $10 million into $1 billion, okay, as one of your investment strategies? And he did very well from that. As a percentage, so you might be making $1 billion, but if you can invest a small amount of money and make a lot more, then that's great. Now, that's why I believe in financial education. The reason I become a self-made millionaire in my 20s is that I invested heavily. When people say, where should you invest first? I always say, in yourself. in your education, because just one extra distinction can save you making a lot of errors, can save you a lot of time and save you a lot of money. That's the real value of that. So just the distinctions you're going to learn this weekend. You're investing several days of your time, but the extra distinctions can increase your success level and get you where you want to go that much quicker. Does that make sense? And importantly, it helps you avoid making mistakes that many people do, which is okay to make mistakes. I've made mistakes as an investor. That's how we learn. But you're better off learning off someone else's mistakes. So I lost about $500,000 in the beginning of my US property investing. So who here wants to lose $500,000? Okay, who here wants to learn off my mistake of losing $500,000? Okay, so it saves you the money. So that's what we want to look at, and that's why I'm excited about US property, because there's an anomaly in the market that's created this extraordinary opportunity. So how did this come about? How did we get to a situation where the US property market becomes so decimated in such a total free fall where we can take, which has been a huge crisis over here. But in the Chinese proverb, crisis equals what? Jot this down. Crisis equals what? Opportunity, if we're looking for opportunity. Do you know more wealth was created out of the Great Depression than in boom times? Some of the best companies in the world were created out of the Great Depression. So a lot of people are scared about particularly Australians. Now, I'm Australian, so I can say what I like about Australians. Is that true? Australia is one of the best performing economies in the world. It's got one of the lowest unemployment rates in the world. Yet, most Australians are pessimistic about their future, pessimistic about the economy. And they're not investing with certainty. They're not taking action with certainty. They're hesitant, unsure of themselves. Overly conservative. Now, those are Australians where you live in a very conservative culture. Just come to Las Vegas, you figure that out, okay? But conservative in the sense of our mindset as far as investing, etc. So sometimes it's great to be conservative, but if we're too conservative, it can lead us to missing out on opportunities. Is that true? We can be overly cautious, okay? So, and we don't take advantage of the opportunity. Most economies around the world, or people around the world, would love to have the financial dynamics that Australia has right now. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying our political leadership is perfect, and that creates a lot of uncertainty, but as an investor, we have phenomenal opportunity. We also are incredibly rich by world standards. I remember coming to the United States, to Las Vegas, actually 2001. I think it was around, the dollar was 47 cents. 47 cents. What is it today? $1.03, and it's been up to what, $1.10. That is a big difference. 2001, you're in Vegas, you feel very poor. If you think this place is expensive now, you should have been here in 2001. Okay, that's a massive difference in buying power. It's not until we actually leave our own country to realize how rich we are. There's many people in Australia that think they're poor because they've never actually seen poor before. If you grow up in a rich country and never seen poverty before, how do you know whether you're rich or poor? You don't, because humans, jot this down, require a thing called contrast. Without contrast, we don't know where we're at. It's only when we realize that, hang on a minute, in comparison to the world standards, the poorest Australian is one of the richest people on the planet. That's why it irks me when people think, in Australia, like, how do you become wealthy? Oh, well, you can't become wealthy in Australia. It's not possible. Or you have to be lucky. And it's crazy. We live in a rich country. We have tremendous opportunities. So let's be smart about that and take advantage of it. So the property crash, what caused it? Well, there was not one individual thing that caused it. There was a couple of combinations of things. And I want you to understand that crisis is opportunity. So it doesn't matter all the doom and gloom that's coming out, all the things that are going to happen in the future in the world economy, etc. You don't have to be scared or worried about that, because it can create a lot of fear and uncertainty. But if you have a strong psychology, uncertainty equals opportunity. If you can become comfortable in life with being uncertain, and you can jot this down, the greater your capacity to deal with uncertainty in your life is the greater your capacity to become rich. Jot that down. The greater your capacity to deal with uncertainty in your life, the greater the capacity to become rich. It's the same, you can apply that to any aspect of your life. And what do you mean by that, Jamie? I'm just saying, if you can learn to be comfortable with an uncertain environment, as a result of that, then you'll be able to take advantage of opportunity and not be scared by it. Okay? The people that are least financially successful, they want a safe, secure what? What do they want? A safe, secure job. Now, there is no safe, secure job in the 21st century. It's an illusion, but people buy into that illusion. So even though, let me think, can Richard Branson, does he go for a safe, secure job, or does he have the capacity to deal with great uncertainty? What do you think? He has the capacity to deal with great uncertainty. He doesn't know his income this year, exactly what it will be. If someone's working in a $50,000 a year salary position, they know exactly with total certainty how much they're going to earn for the next 12 months. True? Say they get that certainty, but they trade off for that certainty the uncertainty of what they could potentially earn. Where Richard Branson has tremendous uncertainty in what he's going to earn this year. He can earn very little through to $100 or $200 million. Does it make sense? What would you rather? $50,000 a year or zero up to maybe $200 million? See, most people will trade off the uncertainty for certain safety, and that reduces their ability to become successful. Now, I know I'm speaking to these people in this room. Most of you already have a psychology that enables you to deal with uncertainty better than most people in the environment you live in. Does it make sense? Therefore, you're more likely to consider alternate possibilities, and as a result of that, you're more likely to succeed, because most people could, but never open to the possibility, never even get started. Because when you think about it, you don't actually have to be an Einstein to make $100,000 a year passive income from the US property market. It's not exactly overly complex. We're going to go into it. You just have to be smart enough to recognize the opportunity, have the psychology to follow through, and be comfortable with dealing with something that's considered alternate investment, not a traditional style investment. Making sense? And many of you have already done that in your careers already. Who's in business for themselves? Who's in business for themselves? If you're an entrepreneur, you know how to deal with uncertainty. Is that true? If you wanted a safe, secure income, would you become an entrepreneur? Yes or no? Absolutely not. But because you've been able to deal with uncertainty, you can then develop a certain income and develop certainty from your business if you become good at it. Because certainty doesn't come from external things. It comes from where? Within. And that's when we talk about psychology of investing. When you're comfortable, you generate the certainty within yourself. Just like I had to generate the certainty that US property 2 years ago, I said, I'm bullish on it. It's going to be a great strategy, even when most people are going, you're crazy. You've got it wrong, Jamie. Some people said, I followed what you've done for years, but I think you got it wrong. You're reading US wrong. But I didn't realize why I said that. And already I've been proven to be right. Is that true? If you look at the articles that are coming out, etc. But I already knew I would be right, not because it's about being right or wrong, because I was willing to invest on this basis. Jot it down. I was willing to invest in the US property market 2 years ago on the basis that there was zero capital growth for the next 10 years. For 10 years. I was willing to say the US economy may go into a Japanese-style led recession of like in 1990s. If you follow history of economies, Japan went into a decade-long, or it's been longer than a decade recession now. 90s was like stagnant. I said the way the US economy is heading 2 years ago, it has a strong possibility the US economy may not recover for 10 years. So that was fairly conservative, pessimistic type view, is it true? But it didn't stop me from investing. Because I said, even if I can buy an asset at the bottom of the market, or some people said maybe it hasn't bottomed, maybe it might go down further. But if I could buy it close to the bottom even, and the US economy never improved for 10 years, am I happy with my decision? The answer for me was yes. So now where a lot of people think it's uncertain, total uncertainty to go and invest in a foreign market that's just been destroyed, I could develop certainty within because I go, you know what? Even if it doesn't rise for the next 10 years, even if real estate prices don't recover for 10 years, even if they actually never recover, if the US economy is the worst case scenario, no recovery, no growth, then I was still comfortable doing it. Does that make sense? Why would I still be comfortable doing that? Well, if you can buy assets that, let's say a house was in its peak, 2007, was the peak of the market at $250,000, and you can now buy that house for say $75,000. Who's okay with that as an investment? Of course, because it's so simple. We're looking at that. Now, if the US economy never recovered for 10 years, no price appreciation for the next 10 years, who is still comfortable with that investment? If it's obviously positive cash flow. Of course we are. We're still comfortable with that investment. Therefore, you see where other people are seeing doomsday, uncertainty, we can see, certainty. I'm comfortable with that decision. I don't care if I don't get price appreciation. All I care about is this. What I'm after is intrinsic value. If this house costs to build today, replacement value, let's say the replacement value of this house is $150,000, as an example. Jot these figures down. Was 250, but remember that was an inflated market. That was overvalued. If you're buying something at 250, 2007, that you can have built for 150, are you paying too much, yes or no? Yeah, it's like buying a stock overpriced. But it's going up, it's going up. See, it's easy. Here's what's the crazy thing. Americans, God bless America, most Americans are so scared because of what's happened in the US property market, they haven't been buying property the last 2 years. The same people that were happy to buy a house at $250,000 at the height of the market, because why? There was total certainty back then. US property prices have always risen for 150 years. Property doesn't crash. That's what people believe to be true. Total certainty, external certainty, not from within, because most people can't develop the certainty within. They rely on external certainty. In other words, peer pressure. What everyone else is doing. Everyone else is buying houses. Everyone else is quitting their job. I always do this as a test. If your taxi driver is a property developer, it's time to get out of the property market. If your taxi driver is giving stock tips, okay, is buying stocks, time to get out of the stock market. In other words, people were able to get total certainty because everyone else was doing it. So when everyone else is doing it, height of the market, people paying ridiculous prices for something. When these people that paid $250 going, I wouldn't buy US housing, then you hear what happens, it's crashed, it's too risky. They won't buy it at 75, but they bought it at $250, and they think it's risky. Where other people are saying, Jamie, I think you've got it wrong. If the US property market 2 years ago hasn't bottomed, it could go even lower. Well, let's think about that, because at then, we don't know for sure. I don't have a crystal ball. Warren Buffett doesn't have a crystal ball. Donald Trump doesn't have a crystal ball. But what we have as investors with a PhD in results as opposed to theory, because most of the people that come out and do commentary on the US property market or the Australian property market are people that have academic theory. They're professors or they're commentators or they're economists. And God bless those people. I'm sure we need them for something. But we don't need them to make our investment decisions. I only listen to people who have a PhD in what? Theory or results. Why am I and others, even the Australian property market, able to better predict what's going to happen? Oh, we all go into a secret room, we have this crystal ball that says, Jamie, here's your insider information, so what's going to happen. No, we don't. We have common sense. We have some experience, but we mainly we understand fundamentals, we understand human psychology as well, because that's going to affect investment markets. So you only want to learn how to develop a good investor psychology for yourself. Once you understand yourself better, you'll understand how other people invest or don't invest and how that affects markets. So I knew that if I didn't get the bottom at 75,000 and say worst case, things got worse and this property dropped to say even $50,000, is that such a big deal, yes or no? If I'm taking the risk here, even when I thought it was close to the bottom, and even worst case, I was wrong and it did bottom out at 50,000. I'm still well in front of these people that paid, say, 250. Making sense? And the cash return that I can get on a property, if I'm getting 15%, 20% cash returns, I can still profit even if it did drop in the short term to 50,000. Why would I still be comfortable paying for an asset at 75 that might drop to 50 back 2 years ago? Because if it costs $150,000 to replace that home, then I know I have intrinsic value in here. Jot that word down. We're looking for intrinsic value. What's it mean? It just means real. I guess you say real value. Why is it real value? If it's $150,000 to replace this house, I would dare say that this $75,000 house is at least worth $125,000. Why? Because if it costs $150,000 to build, well, it's not quite worth the $150,000 because someone can go and get a new house built for $150,000. It's a second-hand home, but it's probably worth at least $125,000. Make sense? Therefore, if I'm buying at $75,000, I have inbuilt $50,000 intrinsic value profit. That's what it's worth, at least. So who cares if it drops in the short term even more? Now, the reality is, I didn't believe it was going to drop. Otherwise, I would have been trying to get more distressed prices. But I'm just saying, worst case, what if I was wrong? So a lot of people, they thought it hadn't bottomed, so they waited, where I proceeded and took advantage of the market. Is it making sense? Even though taking on that risk, and that risk is quite small. So because often by trying to avoid risk, we often end up risking more. Those people who tried to avoid that, maybe waiting for it to get lower, missed that opportunity because it didn't get lower. Actually, what we've seen, these houses, a lot of initial houses we bought were in Phoenix. You'll see in the US home study, we talk a lot about Phoenix. Yet we're now not buying in Phoenix anymore because the dynamics of the market have changed. And that's why we'll update you this weekend that you know the different cities that we're focused on. And no doubt in 6 months, 12 months, those cities may change again. That's constantly evolving. So I was happy, I was certain, I could get certainty within buying houses here, good rental return, intrinsic values here. I knew what the replacement value was. I also was able to predict this. Now, even though I said and believed if worst case, the US economy doesn't recover for 10 years, see, I don't control what happens to the US economy. I don't control what happens to US property prices. Remember, as an investor, we focus on what we can control. What we can control is our decision making and our level of action. True? What we don't control is everything else. Now, the least successful people are trying to focus on things they don't control. And they're not focused on things they do control. That's why they're not successful in life. Repeat after me. Something to think about. It's actually very simple when we think about that. It's common sense. Yet common sense is one of the most uncommon things there is on the planet. We should call it, perhaps, uncommon sense. So what we're going to understand is what we can control. So then I said also, but I did my research. I also realized that the construction industry in the US property market had been basically wiped out. I'll give you some, there's an article here. This was out of the newspaper I was reading on the plane on the way here 2 days ago. Just more evidence of what's happening in the US property market. But they will talk about, on the second page, I think there's some figures of how many people, no, the first, bottom of the first page. There used to be more than 2.1 million construction workers. So 2.1 million construction workers lost their jobs between 2007 and 2011, which is obviously 2007 was the start of the credit crisis through to 2011. 2.1 million US construction workers on the bottom of the first page lost their jobs. So that industry, that's how many people were involved in building homes in the United States, lost their jobs. And since then, though, there's been a recovery of 273,000 that have been hired back. What that was telling me was this, well, before I go into that, let's go and look at the history of how it all happened. If we go back to the Bill Clinton era, there was a law passed in the dying days of the Clinton presidency, which really come from do-gooders that wanted to help improve the world, so the intent was good. And the law was to help people that couldn't afford a home get a home. So people that grow up on theory. So here's a challenge in the world. There's people that have theoretical knowledge. Just like what they go, let's help the people starving in Africa and let's go and give them free food. In theory, that's good intent and we think it's going to help people. In reality, giving them free food makes them dependent, and two, the poor local farmers can't compete with free food and it wipes out the local farmers, and now they can't be self-sufficient and produce. Do you see what I'm saying? So often good intention can create problems because there's usually a reason for why something's happening. Nothing, jot this down, nothing happens without a reason. Anything that's happening is a reason for it. You want to understand what that reason is because then you can predict what's likely to happen. So people that had theory about fiscal responsibility said, we should help people that can't afford a house get a house. When reality is this, What my millionaire mentor would say, if people can't afford a house, there's a reason they can't afford a house. That sounds harsh, doesn't it? But it's also the truth. They can't afford a house because they don't have the fiscal discipline to save a deposit. They don't have the fiscal discipline to invest in their education or access it so they have enough skills to get a good paying job or better. They may spend their money on other things, so they're not good people to loan money to. There's probably a reason in most cases they don't have a house. Of course, we want to help people, but you've got to help people help themselves. Is that true? So they passed this law. So what it meant is banks had to loan X amount of money and house loans to underprivileged people. The other thing that happened, obviously, in the Bush administration is after September 2001, the US economy was, they were afraid it's going to go into free fall. So what they wanted to do was stimulate the economy. The fastest way to stimulate the economy is to do what? What industry? Take a guess. Take a guess. What industry? Construction, yeah. Housing construction predominantly is the best way to stimulate an economy. Because if you read the figures, I'm not sure this in this article, I think it is, near the top. The National Association of Home Builders, a trade group, estimates that for each home built generates, this is in the US, each home built generates 3 full-time jobs and $90,000 in new tax revenue for the governments. Massive stimulus. So the Bush administration was like, we need to stimulate the US economy and we want to stimulate housing growth. So increase the credit supply, allow banks to be more risky with their lending, and it'll keep the economy going. It's also good for helping get re-elected, because the economy is growing, it's easy to get re-elected. Is that true? So as a result of that, there was a massive credit boom. People that were in the mortgage industry leading up to 2007 were making absolute fortune. Actually, Jordan Belfort, some of you might have heard of Jordan, a friend of mine. He's wrote the book called Wolf of Wall Street. Who's heard of Jordan Belfort? A few people, you've got to read that book. It's an amazing book. Jordan was actually involved in making a fortune. I mean, he went to jail for 2 years because, if you haven't read the story, the movie's being made about Jordan right now. Leonardo DiCaprio is playing him, and it'll be out early next year. It's a classic story of rags to riches, back to rags, in jail for 2 years, and then a complete recovery. But he'd made a lot of money, had employed about 1,000 stockbrokers, selling penny stocks to wealthy investors years ago in New York. So he was making $50 million a year, got into drugs, etc., blew the lot, and then got done for securities fraud. You'll know many companies that he was the majority shareholder in. Was Steve Madden Shoes as an example. Jordan was behind all these companies and took most of these companies public. Made an absolute killing. He was a very smart man. But they were basically pigeon-holding shares. When you list a company, the laws are that you can't sell your shares for X period of time. It's in escrow, like Facebook. The investors in Facebook, you notice they couldn't sell their shares straight away. The early investors were allowed to sell their shares recently. The employees certainly can start selling some of their shares. Other investors are still locked up. It's to protect what's stopping pump and dumping on the stock market. We've got to be careful that if you're a stock market investor, people get a company, it's doing well, they put on the stock market, they pump it up the share price, and then as soon as it's listed, they sell all their shares and do the runner, and the company dives. And the investors that invested lose their money. So it's to protect from that happening. So anyhow, what they would do, a lot of people do on Wall Street, is they would have the shares in their friends' names, etc., and they would get their friends to sell the shares, okay, which is securities fraud. You're not allowed to do that. So Jordan was sent to jail for 2 years over that. And then he talks about his story, how he recovered from that. But one of the things he was doing, as many people were, he was in the mortgage industry briefly, and they're making absolute killing up to 2007, because basically there were stories in some cities, including San Francisco, where basically homeless people were getting were given loan applications to sign. They're giving them a loan and a house. That's how bad it was, because these banks were just after money and making money. So when there's a lack of fiscal responsibility, and that's what started to happen. So what they would do is they would sell, jot this down, mortgage-backed securities. So the banks were driven by profit, lacked control because the government was happy to stimulate the US economy, so a lot of credit. So that you've got to understand this, what's going to happen to a property market if all of a sudden, let's say we're in Australia, and then if the policy was changed that, okay, anyone now in Australia even if you're homeless, can now get a loan to buy a property, buy a house. Think about it. What would happen in the short term to prices? Would they go down of houses or would they go up? They would go up massively because why? There's all this increased demand of people that couldn't afford a house before now can. They want to go out and buy a house. So you've got a lot of people bidding. There's only X amount of houses in an economy. More and more people bidding, the price is going to go up. And people can afford to pay more because it's easy credit. As a result, the US property market's going 150,000 up to 250,000 as an example. A house that's only worth 150,000. And then what happens is people become investors. They want to get rich quick. They want to quit their jobs. And you talk to people, there's a lot of people up until 2007 had quit their jobs. I know I was in America a lot over these years, even friends. And I remember a friend he's worth about $400 million, lives in Los Angeles. I was with a group of Anthony Robbins Platinum members about 7 years ago in the United States. And he was a smart guy. And he made a lot of property, bought a lot of apartments in the US. And I remember him talking about 2005, 2006. He said, Jamie, you know what? I've decided to liquidate my US apartments and my houses. Now, this is during a boom. Most people be like, are you crazy? Look how much they're going up. You guys know, I've just got a feeling that something's going to change, and I've made all this money. I bought these 1,000 apartments and houses like years ago. I'm going to get out. So he did. He started selling them. And he told, I remember having lunch with some people, he goes, and these other young guys had quit their jobs. They were developing houses. So they would just build more houses. They get a line of credit against the house because the values would keep going up. So anyone could get a line of credit. And they were living off that and developing more houses. That's fine as the market's rising because you can just pull the money out and live off it. And I remember him telling me, like, you guys are crazy, you're going to get eaten alive, the market's going to correct, and it's all going to come tumbling down like a pack of cards. There were so many people that were full-time property investors that they were getting rich quick and made millions. Actually, guys, is Ben or Tyler speaking tomorrow? Where's the team? Yep. So I don't know if Tyler shared his story, but otherwise he'll share it. I mean, he'd built a $20 million property fortune and blew the lot because it was rising so fast, and he's only a young guy. And all come tumbling down because there was no underlying intrinsic value was here and people were playing up here. Okay, it's fine if you can read the market and get out, as my friend from LA did. And then I caught up with him 2 years ago, and he said, Jamie, guess what? I'm buying US houses again. Smart guy. So made his money, pulled his money out, and then back into it, and commercial property as well, where a lot of other people didn't read it. Or got greedy and didn't see. Here sometimes people get greedy and don't want to read it. They don't want to see the reality. Is that true in life sometimes? When there's obvious signs but we don't want to see it. I've seen people in seminars and I've taught them the rules of investing, but some people only listen to what they want to hear. Is it true? No, I don't want to hear that, and then they just neglect it, but it costs them. So be careful that we're not just listening to what we want to hear, we're listening to everything and acting on the best information. So where I was up to before that. How do we get to this anomaly in the market which gives you the opportunity to become wealthy faster than normal and take advantage of the US housing crisis? So as a result of that, the US economy was heavily stimulated through the construction industry, and up until 2007, even into parts of 2008, before it all come tumbling down. Now, what banks were doing back then is they come up with these great idea, mortgage-backed securities. Mortgage-backed to an investor sounds, oh, it's secured by mortgages, secured by US housing, must be safe. So they would get all these mortgages. Lehman Brothers are one of the biggest doing this. And they would get all the mortgages. So they'd actually even go and buy the construction companies. They would then buy the finance companies that were loaning. So they actually own all this. And because what they were doing is they want more and more loans secured by housing, and then they would go and sell them to foreign investors and make an absolute fortune on it. So they didn't care. So all of a sudden they're like, well, who cares? They just want more people signing loans and more houses being built because they're not taking the risk. They're selling the risk to investors around the world who are being told mortgage-backed securities, US real estate has always gone up over 150 years. It's safe, and they could just sell them. And a lot of big funds, managed funds, super funds around the world were buying these. Okay? So they were happy until It just getting so high, and some of the foreign investors started going, how secure really are these? And all of a sudden, Lehman Brothers is dealing in hundreds of billions of dollars of these, had them, and all of a sudden the market dried up and other banks to buy them. No one else wanted to buy them. You're going like, it's too risky. These are mortgage backed, but it's not secure enough. And as a result, the market dried up, and that was the start of the credit crisis. Lehman Brothers, you remember, was, all of a sudden it's left holding all this debt, and it can't pass the ball on. It's left holding all this, and it comes tumbling down. And the day that happened, the world's financial system was within a matter of hours from imploding. A lot of people don't realize how close it come to financial Armageddon, where it would have destroyed the world economy. That's how close it got. And we know what happened. The world went into a panic, and US property prices already were coming down, and then they just crashed. Stock markets crashed, and there was massive panic. All happened predominantly from greed. Some of it was good intention, others just pure greed. And they'd allowed a property market to bubble, and there's been some severe consequences of that. So the US property market crashed. The UK property market crashed as well, not as badly. Spain property markets, I remember being there years ago, property prices were going up and up, and you could see a bubble coming. I mean, it's not like you couldn't see this stuff coming for years. It was getting so obvious. But a lot of people didn't want to see, didn't want to read or hear what was really going on, because they thought they'd just get rich quick. The danger of people wanting to get rich quick. The danger of everyone wanting to be an investor and not working. It doesn't work. If too many people do that, it doesn't work. So that's what started to happen, and all come tumbling down. And therefore, we saw property prices drop like this, and crisis now is our opportunity. Who's excited by that, by the way? Okay? Because you're on the right side of the coin. You wouldn't have been excited if you had houses worth 250 that dropped to 75,000. You'd be a little bit depressed and probably going, don't talk to me about property, especially US property, because you're now being burnt. You have negative anchor, pain, pain, pain. I don't want to know about it. I've been burnt before. I put my hand on the stove. I've been burnt. I'm out of here. So the very people that could be profiting at 75,000 won't touch it. Who can relate to that in other areas of your life? Is it true? When, in other words, we've had a bad experience, we've been burnt before, therefore we don't do it. Yet when we should be going, smart, hang on a minute, what did we do wrong? Let's do something differently, learn from our mistakes, and let's see what we can do to profit. We paid too much for the property. We should be excited now about buying them here. We should have been cautious about buying here. Making sense? Now that seems, in hindsight, that's very easy to look at, isn't it? But to become wealthy, you need hindsight or what? You need foresight. So 2 years ago, that was my prediction, and I was happy if the US economy didn't recover. And however, we've seen that it has started to recover. So if you're not up to speed on what's happening in the US property market, I'll go through some stats on that for you. That will give you a lot more certainty. And it's just about reading and staying up to date. Okay? There's always opposing views. What happened in the Australian property market at the time, if you remember, there was people such as Professor Stephen Keen, even Harry Dent, who I had out last year, US economists, other people saying the Australian property market's going to crash. This is back in 2008, 40 to 60%. Why were they saying that? Because the US market has, the UK market has, Australia's going to crash. And I remember being invited on radio to debate about these things. And I was going out saying 2008, the Australian property market will not crash 40 to 60%. I'm willing to bet it will rise as much as 20% before there's a correction. Now, that was a pretty bold statement to say publicly in 2008, because remember, the world was in a panic. People were pessimistic. Australians are pessimistic even in a boom, let alone when there's things uncertain. However, within 18 months of that, the Melbourne property market rose 18%. So why were people like me right and other people so severely wrong? It's because, one, they're based on theory, they're not investors, and two, they don't understand the fundamentals. So what was different about the Australian property market then to the US is this. In Australia, did we have rapidly rising population, yes or no? Yes or no? We did. Immigration levels and total population increase was something like, well, immigration levels were up to 330,000 at the time. If you know that, that helps you make decisions. So I'm thinking fundamentals to the Australian property market back then is rapidly rising population. Yes, it will slow because they'll slow immigration slightly, but they can always turn the tap back on. So we have a construction industry that's not keeping up with the amount of housing you need. I think it was producing 135,000 houses a year. They predicted we need at least 30,000 more houses per year. So if you knew those stats, the demand is higher than there was supply, so that would add to it over the years. And even though I was not so bullish on the Australian housing at the time, the fundamentals weren't the same as the US. The US property market, did it have an undersupply of homes in 2008 or an oversupply? Take a guess, 50-50. Well, think about it, even if you don't know, so I'm not expecting you to be an economist, what I'm expecting you to do is understand fundamentals. So then you can predict and preempt what's going to happen on your own. It had remember, you understand it had an oversupply. Why? Because the credit was easy, anyone could borrow. The construction industry had grown, they'd built so many homes, construction companies up until then, or 2007, the stock prices of them were going through the roof because they were growing and building so much. Everyone was a property developer. So there was a massive oversupply of property, which also helped is one why there's going to be a correction. So those things would tell you, hang on, warning signs coming, market's going to crash. Now, here's what a lot of people don't realize though. The US population, has it been growing or falling? Once again, it's 50-50, take a guess. You're not going to win blackjack if you can't win this, okay? It's still growing. So these are things you want to know. The American population has been growing even through the credit crisis. So when other people are going, Jamie, I think you've got it wrong buying from US property 2 years ago. No, I don't, because I already know the US population was continuing to grow. I also knew the construction industry went from being really large and building a lot of homes to dropping right down. I think the stats of what it dropped down to are in here. Well, it's what it's grown to, but if we look at what the stats had dropped down to, on average, they've built about 1.5 million homes per year since 1959 in America. In Australia, by the way, they built about 155,000 homes a year. You know, obviously, the US property market is 10 times bigger. But which is interesting because the US population is 14 times bigger than Australia, but their property market's only 10 times bigger. You can also help you understand why Australia has still a lot of pent-up demand. And I'll talk about what's going to happen in Australia in a moment, those you'll want to know. So, but I'm trying to look for the figure that it dropped down to at the bottom of it. It's on the graph. I think it dropped down to as little as 600,000 homes a year were being built. This latest article from a couple of days ago, it talks about how, and this is a very bullish report, is the US housing starts are up to now 872,000. It's up 15% from last month, or this September's figures from August. It's up 34% construction, new homes being built in America from 12 months ago. Is up 34%. It's well ahead of forecasts. They were, you know, in recent articles I've been talking about, if you follow my blog, etc., is that, you know, there's a lot of increased construction levels, so they're building a lot of new homes, but this has come out 3 days ago so far above what they expected. 34% increase from a year ago. So you can see the construction industry is growing again in the US. Okay, rapidly, and a lot more people being hired. They go on to say if this can sustain itself, it could actually turn the US economy around because construction is such a big part of the US economy. Now, I don't really care whether it does or not. It's irrelevant because we're just investing on good cash flow returns. So whatever happens, happens. But it's possible. Some people say, well, you know, it could be a dead cat bounce. I'm not really going to get caught up into that because we don't know what's going to happen. It's very promising at the moment. It's more likely to suggest that we are going to see a more rapid recovery in US housing, at least in the short term, than what I would have predicted 2 years ago and what I would have predicted even 3 months ago. Okay? So on the upside, it means that you could, when you're buying US housing now, you could see faster appreciation. But remember, are we buying for appreciation? Well, I guess if we get it, we'll take it as a bonus. But when I started buying, I said any capital growth in the US housing market is a bonus. I'm after the cash flow returns. Any appreciation is a bonus. However, the bonus is this. You're probably likely to see a lot more appreciation in the shorter term than we originally hoped or predicted. The downside of that is the window of opportunity to get the best bargains and the best distressed prices is actually the door's starting to slam shut faster than we would have anticipated. That's the downside, okay? You guys are already onto it, but like in all things, what will happen, the same thing will happen in Australia. Give another 6, 12 months, 18 months, everyone will go, oh, I'm going to go and buy US housing. They'll wait, most people will wait till everyone's doing it. When that happens, you've sort of missed the boat. Does that make sense? You've got to always get ahead of the trend, and why most people don't, because they don't have the certainty within to do something contrarian to what everyone else is doing. Do you see how it all comes down to psychology? If you're the only one amongst your circle of friends doing US housing and they're going, even 2 years ago, you're an idiot, why are you doing that? But you're confident and know within why you're doing it, then you're the one that will profit. But you're the one taking the risk. If you get it wrong, you're going to look like an idiot. Does that make sense? But you're happy to do that because you know there's a risk to everything. There has to be a risk versus reward. But you're comfortable with the risk. You look at that, you go, I'm comfortable with the risk. If I'm wrong, it drops to 50,000, I'm still getting good rental returns, I can't lose. If I don't take action and it recovers back to here, then I've lost more. And that's what most people do. They will be scratching their head, working away at their jobs, stressed, dreaming about buying lotto tickets, dreaming if they win lotto, when the opportunity to not win lotto but actually produce the same results exists when they could do something about it. Make sense? That's why I'm excited. Turn to the person next to you and teach them why you could be bullish on the US property market. Go for it quickly.